Let's use Git to create a new repository and to then go in and learn some of the concepts related to repositories, such as cloning a repository from GitHub, making commits to changes, and syncing those changes. So what we're going to cover is we're going to just talk about Git in the context of GitHub. We're going to pull a project from somewhere, make commits to that project, and then push those changes. So first, let's talk about the difference between Git and GitHub. Git is the source control provider engine used by GitHub. So Git is software that you can install on your Windows, Linux, Mac machine. You can make commits, you can push changes, pull changes, you can clone repositories, you can share code, make contributions. You can run entire projects and organizations using Git alone. It can be ran locally, it can be ran on a server, it can be distributed. It's a lightweight, fast source control provider that can be used in a lot of different places. GitHub is essentially a hosted version of Git. So it gives you everything you're used to with Git, except it has additional features really focused around building a community around your software and projects. Collaboration features, issues, pull requests, forks. It makes it a little bit easier for people who are new to get started quickly with Git, and then for people who use Git for a long time to enable advanced scenarios. So what we're going to start off doing is we're going to run through a really simple scenario where we're going to have a repository in GitHub. We're going to pull code and basically save a copy of that code on our local machine. So we're essentially cloning a repository for GitHub. So we're pulling that. We're going to make a commit to our repository on our local machine. And then we're going to push those changes back up to GitHub. And then we can pull and push changes back and forth between our local machine and GitHub. So on my desktop, I'm going to create a brand new folder. I'm just going to say working directory will be the name of my folder. Double click it. There's nothing in here. If I open a PowerShell window here, I can initialize a brand new Git repo, essentially because I have Git on my local machine. So I'm going to say git init, and it's going to create a brand new repo, and the metadata about that repository is right here in the .git folder. Now, if you use Windows, you're not going to see that by default. You just have to click the hidden items button to see that. And now that we have a repository, we can go ahead and make changes, commit those changes. And so the easiest way to do this, we could do this manually in the command line, is to use a tool like Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to right click and open this folder with code, and we have a Git repository here by clicking the source control button. Now I can add a new file, hello.txt, and then here I'll just type in hello world, and we'll see the #1 indicator here, indicating that we have a single pending change. Now I can commit this change. I'll say edit hello world as my commit message, and hit commit. And now that change is saved to my local source control repository. Now I can do other stuff. I can do advanced things. If you remember, all the metadata about our repository is in this nice little Git folder. If we didn't want to use Git anymore, we essentially just delete the Git folder. I'm going to also delete the hello.txt file. You'll see that we don't have any active source control over this folder. So source control allows us to make changes, undo changes, share changes, stage them, essentially control the source of our project. Now, we can initialize the source control repository right here in Visual Studio Code by just clicking this button, and this does the same thing as the git init button. As a matter of fact, if I go in, I'll see the Git folder is created all over again. Now that's all fine and dandy, but I want to do something that's a little bit more advanced. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to github.com, and I'm going to go to Microsoft Certified Trainer User, and I'll see this user has 2 projects. My first project is the one I'm interested in. I want to copy this to my local machine, so I'm going to clone this project. Now I have a nice little URL I can use. So it's essentially my first project.git. I'll copy this URL, close my browser, and I can either open a PowerShell window or I can open a code. we're going to open a code and use the terminal just because I want to show you can do this PowerShell, you can do this in terminal, command prompt, whatever works for your machine. So let's say git clone. I'll type in the URL. Now, if I just clone it, it's going to create a folder called My First Project, or you can specify a folder. I'm going to type in dot to specify that I want to clone that project to the existing folder. Hit enter. You'll see a README file and a license file from GitHub right here. Again, we have our Git folder. Now I could go look at this project on github.com. So just like we saw last time, github.com, Microsoft Certified Trainer, My First Project. We'll see that this project's still on GitHub. I'm going to go down here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some changes. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to change this to say My First Project. Isn't this an amazing project? Save my changes. We'll see here that we have a pending change. For my commit message, I'll say updated readme file, and I commit. So my change is committed to my local source control repository. Now, if I want to send this change to GitHub, that's easy too. I can either push or sync. Now, pull means to pull whatever changes have been made in GitHub that I don't have locally. Push means to send any changes I have locally that don't exist in GitHub. And sync essentially says do both. So we're going to go ahead and sync. Now you see a little indicator here showing you that it's syncing the changes, and it looks like it just finished. So if we go to GitHub and we refresh, we'll see that the README file has just been updated. Isn't this an amazing project? My first project. So I was able to copy the repository locally, make some changes, commit them locally, and then push them back up to GitHub. This gets really interesting if I want to do some advanced things. For example, in a real world repository, let's say we have this pink repository, I may not have write access to the real world repository. So I want to save a copy to my local machine. And we do this by forking a repository or making a copy of the repository in our own GitHub account. So I may have a Microsoft Learning repository and I make a copy of it in my own GitHub account. Then from there, we just follow the same workflow. We copy that to our local machine, just like I circled. And then we go down, make changes on a local machine, push those changes back up to our repository, our fork of the repository. And then we have a very special way that we can contribute those changes back into the original GitHub repo, the one that's owned by somebody else that we might not have write permissions to do.